and also would like to invite our moderator for this particular session, our best-selling author, Shrutidhara P. Mohan.
As the Kyoto has allotted to them, is something that typically, I think, engages every author, every potential author, whoever wishes to write something at some point of time, which is all about, what makes a perfect plot. So we would, of course, be listening to all of them, and I think around 10 minutes for each of them would be all right. 10 minutes for each of them is what we would, be looking at before I hand over the microphone to them, just to maybe you have, that kind of a binary plotters versus pansters kind of a position, and then of course there are always there's a third position. There are people who are in between, who would plot half of it and not plot the other half of it, maybe. So together, one is we look at what perfection would be, and we also look at what together a perfect plot would come to be like. So we have Debanjali, we have, I go by his pen name, we have Utpal, and we have Dr. Kisholoy, the three panelists, and I hand over the microphone to them, and I also leave them to decide in which order they wish to speak. A panel discussion is also kind of, it's a little more informal and collaborative, so if they...
Secondly, the angle of the topic is to formalize the writing. Literary writing comes from life, and life can be never formalized. So my thought is to put some rules regarding plot or plotting of a story. But the golden rule is, there is no golden rule at all. So I don't know how you will formalize or put this angle up and ahead. So first of all, I will, as a conventionally, plot is nothing but a string of events or series of events stringed together according to the story or the content that expresses the content of the book. And to my opinion, plot is that which holds the whole book together and its contents. Now I would ask others to speak on it.
Well, for me, what I feel is for any book, whether it's a fiction or it's a non-fiction, every book has a plot, so to say. And one of the most important things that make a plot interesting or perfect is the layout of the plot or the presentation of the plot. Now, how you present it. The way, in case of fiction, the way you develop the characters, the way you sketch the characters, the interplay of the characters in the story, what is coming first, what is coming next, and how you are concluding the story. These all things are very, very important when it comes to making a perfect plot. Because when we talk about perfection, it is something where you are able to engage the audience. The audience, if the engagement is lost, they will just leave the book. So whether they are reading it online or whether they are reading it offline, they are just going to leave the book. So you have to keep that engagement alive, and you have to find out ways and means of keeping that engagement alive. Now there is a genre which is mystery or detective stories, these kind of genre, where we normally feel that people will be engaged. But over there also, if you are unable to develop a plot which keeps your audience engaged, they are going to leave the book. So there are few little things like the layout, the sketching of the characters, the interplay of the characters, which will lead to the engagement, reader engagement.
Hi. Hi everyone. I hope no one is sleepy in here. So today we are here discussing about what makes a good plot. By the term, the word plot, what we understand are the conflicts that's presented in the life or in any story that shapes a character. So what I believe is, when we are thinking about a story, if it's a fiction we're going to write, first we have to have the characters in mind. Not necessary though. But yes, if you know what characters are there in the story, you can definitely put the characters in the certain situations, certain events, certain plots you can form, and then the plot itself will help the character analyze the situation, and at the nick of the time, the character would think when he faces any obstruction, any problem, he will just think of way out, and then it will shape the character, what he wants at that point of time. So it's merely just a descriptive thing might be, but when you think about a story, or even in our life also, when something happens, suppose today I am just walking down the road and I see that a guy is just, waiting with a bunch of flowers in his hands and waiting for his girlfriend. And then there are obstacles. How? The guy is waiting, might be his girlfriend is taking time, so he thinks to, go to any nearby cafe or anywhere and sit and wait. And suppose anything unfortunate happens over there and he needs to run for his life. So what is the next outcome? What is the next thing he's going to do? Because his girlfriend will be coming and she will wait and find he's not there. So she will have a different reaction. So how further, she will feel whether to, question his boyfriend, question her boyfriend, where you are, or the boyfriend doesn't even answer the phone. Just like that, the plot, the story just evolves, it goes on. So as you said, that there's nothing as such, it's fixed, the characters are fixed, the situations are fixed. No, nothing is fixed in life, what I believe. I had experienced multiple unfortunate, events in my life. I've overcome them. And then I see stories can be, written from those true events also. And as I have already written a story, The Impressing Mother, here's my book, The Impressing Mother. It is based on a true story and it was published in 2020 with Kyoto. So it is about two protagonists, one protagonist turning to one antagonist, and then there is only one protagonist and two antagonists in the story. How her life unfolds, because she always wanted to become a mother, but got cheated by her husband with a surrogate mother. So the thing here is, you never know what's going to be the next thing. That's what I believe, that you cannot think always that this should be the plot and the characters will be, reacting in a fixed, manner. It will just go eventually as per the events. The conflict should be there, or else story would not proceed. Without a conflict, we cannot even think what's next. So it has to move, it has to proceed, or else the story would be stuck over there and everything will be boring, just like the Ekta Kapoor serials.
Would the panelists like to talk?
No, Bolshevik. Again, we are just talking about the formalization, and we are going along the beaten track. Actually, live out story or anything else. They are thinking about the plot. So I think one should not bother about the plot. Your content will determine your plot. Or moreover, your point of view determines your plot. Whatever may be your point of view. For me, I don't follow any. Actually, I am a non-maker. I don't write from a single point of view. I always use mixed point of views. So it gives a different story and different plot making. Moreover, plotlessness may be a plot. As storylessness may be a story, like new web stories. Where you stand, what you write, what you see and understand, standing on the ground. Where you standing on the ground, see anything eye to eye. It's your single way or straight view. But if you can view a thing like a bat hanging from a tree, hanging upside down, you will definitely have the different view and people thought the same thing. Or even you can play a high soaring bird and adopt his view. Will definitely the same thing will appear to be very different to you. So plot definitely depends upon how you look at it.
Hall. They will be aware of something called celebrity brands. So there is a brand Bachchan or a brand SRK, so similarly there is brand Dhoni. And every brand has a certain life cycle, an introduction phase, a growth phase, maturity phase and a decline phase. Now when I am segregating his playing career and his endorsement career into these groups, and I am proceeding with writing a biography of Dhoni, it automatically creates differentiation in the market when I speak of non-fiction of Dhoni. So for me, when I talk of creating a plot, first and foremost thing for me is you have to have a story in mind and you have to stick to that story. If it cannot so happen that while I am writing a book, every other day something new is coming to my mind and keep adding to it. At the end of the day, I have to have an outline in place, and yes, I have to have that skeleton in place and the muscles can be added. But if I don't have the skeleton in place, I start writing something and then go about writing something else. I don't think it will end up being a good plot, so to say. So whether it's a fiction, whether it's a non-fiction, you have to have something at the back of your mind that what is going to click with the audience. If I don't have an audience, then why am I writing? And how can I think about my book selling? So I have to write for someone, whether it's a fiction, whether it's a non-fiction, I am definitely writing for someone. And what is it that is going to click? What is it that is going to sell? And accordingly, I will be proceeding with that plot that will click with my audience and that will make my book sellable. So that is what I feel about this aspect.
Truly said that there are phases in branding and writing, and there has to be a backstory, of course. We should have something in mind. We cannot just write lamely. But again, while writing, many a times it happens. When we start writing, we think the events are just going in a particular way, but it doesn't happen. There are changes.
Yes, events you can always change. That's what I am saying. The skeleton has to be in place.
Yes, of course.
So you can always add and deduct whatever.
Exactly.
That you can always do.
As you mentioned about selling, we have to know our audience. First, truly speaking, when I started writing, I never thought to whom I will sell my book. I wrote because I wanted to express. I wanted to let the world know what experience I had. Might be it would be helpful for people. Might be let the world know what someone has experienced. What was the event, how it unfolded, and how it impacted their lives. I just know writing stories, true events, or my imagination. I jot on the paper. That is the thing. But eventually I understood that it's not just writing. Anything that comes to your mind, imagination, has to be creative, of course. And you cannot just imagine anything and write it because it won't sell, of course. But again, if we just think about selling the content, might be you will just fail to sell it. Why? Because you have to think from your heart, not just think, feel from your heart, right from within. Imagination doesn't depend on how you want to sell, whom you want to sell. It comes from within. Might be you're meditating and then suddenly you just think and something comes to your mind. You are visualizing something and there's something called psychology. It's very important. I believe our filmmaker would know that about psychology in movie making. That's quite essential. Without knowing the character and putting our own shoes, stepping into the shoes of the character, we won't understand the journey. And the plot doesn't only decide, how it can be very advantageous when it comes to selling the book. Of course, you have to just write, not just keeping in mind I have to sell it. But yes, you write it something, if the story is good, if the content is good, it's attracting the audience, the readers, of course, it will be sold. And you have to channelize. Many times we new writers or newbies fail to even contact or get in touch with the publishers. In the initial phase, there is struggle, I believe. But it's all about, again, channelizing and getting in touch with the right, place, to the right people. But when it comes to plot, it's about the story. The antagonists, the protagonists, the characters, unfolding of the events, the external and the internal conflicts. Again, it shapes the story. That's what I believe.
Yes, I agree most of the points you put up. The first thing is that when a person writes, he writes for himself. Here lies the Nemesis syndrome. Nemesis used to love his own reflection on the reader. That is the psychology of a writer. He writes to satisfy his ego first, then for other readers. Moreover, as I heard, plot has been divided into many parts. Plot for sellable plot, non-sellable plot, non-creative plot, creative plot, fictional plot. So, of which plot we are discussing here? I don't know. Again, I say, the true writer will never look forward for a reader. Even if one person reads and appreciates, that's sufficient. I need not be said to anyone. I don't realize or hope that everyone will come up and read my book and appreciate me. That can never be. There are political opinions or political parties. There are many groups of readers. You cannot reach every group. So it depends on you which path you will adopt. My path is purely literary path. I don't bother for sale, I don't bother for commercialism, I don't bother for anything. Because I know if as I told you earlier, every land-breaking writers have been refused at this time because they are born before their time. Because they have come up to set another example or another path to go along. Even our Jivananda Das was not properly understood during his time. He was appreciated before his death. Even your point of view and point of philosophy, realize your life changes. Just think of Dostoevsky. Dostoevsky was a turning point. He was paralyzed and he was punished to shot dead by Tsar. And 10 persons were standing one by one, and they were being shot down. When Dostoevsky's turn came, he was just waiting for his death. Then one Ghoshwar came from Tsar and said, no, stop it, Tsar, forgive all of them. In the meantime, 9 people was already dead and Dostoevsky was saved. And after that, what Dostoevsky wrote, for those writings, Dostoevsky is Dostoevsky, not before that point of his life. So that's all for me.
I suppose at the behest of the organizers, I would look to conclude this because we obviously have to keep to our schedule. So just a few concluding words. I think it's interesting. I mean, the panel discussion, I think it had a very interesting arc of convergence and divergence. You know, like the three panelists began with three very distinctly different positions on what makes a perfect plot. But then, you know, like as they progressed, it's not that the differences went away, but for some reason, I believe, you know, like they had kind of a compulsion to say that they largely agree with each other. That was a very interesting, you know, journey of the panel discussion itself. That was one of the things which, as a moderator, I observed. The second thing is something that I think, you know, particularly for the company, for Arjun in particular, for all of you there, this can be a very interesting note that, you know, when required to discuss on what makes a perfect plot, so much of our discussion as authors veers round to, you know, what makes a book saleable. You know, like that whole connection between a perfect plot and the saleability of a book is a point that you just, you know, cannot miss. I think that was also a very significant thing to note. Apart from that, of course, I mean, I'm sure the audience has been listening carefully. I think that was a very interesting difference in perspective between the plotlessness of a story and how you know, how fulfilling that can be in itself versus the whole conception of, you know, how you need to have a skeleton of a plot and how you you know, need to sort of put in the flesh to it, the muscles to it as you go about developing. I think the simple thing that emerges out of this is, particularly also because the panelists ended by saying that they agree with each other, is that, you know, like somewhere, I think, you know, an author would probably be keeping all of that in mind. It would also be, as you know, as the three of them have said, it would be partly be about writing for yourself, the literary side, you know, to the extent of bringing Dostoevsky into the discussion as well, and also at the same time, as Kisholoy was saying, you know, it's not just about writing for ourselves, but it's about the saleability of a book. It's, you know, no author is doing a charity at the end of the day. That of course brings us to a very uncomfortable point about counting royalty money, which I will not get into. We need to finish this panel discussion as well. So that's, I think, you know, like what we made of the panel discussion. Thank you so much for listening to us. Thank you, panelists.
Sure.
Thank you.